Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. So today we're going to be doing a welding and fabrication project, but not one that is centered around any of the cars. So with Valentine's Day coming up, I wanted to show you guys how to make a cool little metal rose sculpture that you can either make for yourselves, gift to a loved one, so on and so forth. So what we're going to do, or what I'm going to do here, is make it out of titanium, as I have this that will serve as the stem, just a few pieces of filler rod that I drill twisted together, and I have this piece of titanium sheet metal that it was used before to cut out different rose petals for a previous rose that I had made. So I'm going to show you guys how I do it with these materials, but bear in mind that you can do it with any type of sheet metal, any type of bar stock, or twisted together filler rod, so on and so forth. So you can take some artistic liberty with how you do this, but the principles apply across the board to any type of metal that you're working with. So without rambling on, let's go ahead and get started with this, and before too long we'll have a neat little rose and something that I think is pretty cool and a really neat gift that you can give to somebody. There isn't really any measuring involved with this. There isn't any definitive dimensions or anything along those lines. It's all kind of freehand, all kind of up to you as the sculptor as to how you want to put these together. So what we do essentially, let me see if I can draw one-handed while filming, is we're going to be making ice cream cone shapes. And the fewer of these that you can make, the better, as it makes the rose look a little bit more authentic. So we make essentially a V, something along those lines, and then radius the top. And you can do this kind of however you would like. This isn't the cleanest one since I'm only using one hand, but you're looking for shapes something like that. And like I said, if you make them a little bit larger and a little bit fewer, it makes the rose look a little bit more natural. I've done it both ways, where I start out with really tiny ice cream cones and work my way up, and it just doesn't work out that well. So I have the first one drawn out here, obviously. I'll go ahead and cut this one out, and then each succeeding ice cream cone that we make, we'll use the previous cut as a template for the next one. So they'll get progressively larger and larger as we go through, which will work to get to the outer petals of the rose more quickly than if I were to freehand draw every single one of these. So let me cut this one out, and we can start drawing out the remaining ones, and I think we'll end up making 8 petals, all things considered, and then we can start bending and shaping these. The 8 petals for the rose are cut out and cleaned up and prepped and everything else, and now we can begin making the rose itself. So essentially what we're going to do is fold the first 2 pieces over on themselves, interlace them, tack weld, and then start forming the remaining 6 pieces around that initial core. So when you're doing this, you want to pay attention to make sure that you keep the rose as even as you possibly can, so you don't end up with an oblong plume of the rose, an oblong head of the rose. So I'll take these first 2 pieces, fold them over like I said, and then start forming the other ones around that core, and before too long we'll have our own little rose ready to be colored up and ready to be welded onto the stem. Once you have your initial rose core made, we then move on to the second layer. And this layer rather than just folding the pieces over on themselves like this, what we're going to do is fold the piece over and then curl the top, just to give it a little bit more volume and to give it a little bit of the correct rose aesthetic. So we're going to take it and it's going to sit essentially 90 degrees off of the center line of the first layer of petals, or something along this line, or these lines right here. So come over to my vise and aim for the center of our little point here in the center of the curved portion up top. Clamp it in. Take the hammer, start it over on itself. Something like that. And then it's just a fitment game to get everything to sit together the way that we want it to. So that isn't bad. I'll probably come here and pinch it just a little bit more in the vise. That might be a little bit too much. Well, by the time that we fold the top over, it probably will be all right. So come from here, again, pinch in the vise, and take just pairs of pliers and start working around. And I have 3 different types of pliers here. I have my lovely hammer pliers that you guys have seen me use before, a pair of needle nose, and then a small pair of channel locks. So between those 3, we'll come in and form this top over. Something along these lines here. And I'll go over and as I'm making each of these petals and clean up the plier marks, but there you can see that starting to fold the top over like an actual rose. And what I'll do is figure out where this wants to sit, tack everything together, then come in, pinch the whole thing in the vise to kind of fold and condense everything a little bit, and then move on to the next petal, and so on and so forth. Our little rose is coming together. So we're down to the final 2 pieces, and the final 2 pieces that will obviously go on the rose. So what we need to do with these is put them on these sides right here. So if you guys notice, the actual core and then the 2 petals outside of the core, I changed my mind and I ran those all in line, then rotated 90 degrees, put the next 2 petals on, and these final 2 will rotate 90 and put them where my middle finger and thumb are, just to continue to add volume to this and to continue to try to make it look as natural as it can. So these last 2 large petals, those will go in those places, and the larger that the pieces are, the easier they are to form, and the easier they are to fit in place here. So we've managed to keep this pretty well balanced in terms of where the petals are, the petal shapes, and everything else. So I'm going to try to not screw it up on the last 2, get those shaped, tacked on, and get the head of the rose completed, and then we can move on to the lower petals and the stem and everything else that will wrap up the rest of it. The top side of the rose looks really nice and pretty well uniform, pretty not oblong or anything else. It looks kind of like an actual rose. And I went ahead and cut the bottom of it off so it will sit flush on the table. And now what I need to do is to make the 2 petals that will be on the base of the actual plume of the rose. And these end up being kind of like an elongated football shape. So if you look at a rose, I believe they have 4 green leaves, 4 green petals on the bottom side of the actual colored plume portion. So that's what we need to try to replicate with this. So let me set you guys down. I'll draw one of these out, see how I like it, and if all is well, then I can cut it out, trace a second one, cut it out, get everything tacked together, and then at that point we're ready to move on to the stem. There we go. We have the bottom leaves on the actual plume of the rose, and it's starting to really look like something. So the next thing that we need to do is to knock the stem out, and that's where these twisted TIG filler rods come into play. Now, I would like to have had a piece of solid bar stock for this, as this filler rod is still a little bit floppy, but I don't have any bar stock here, no titanium bar stock at least, that would look aesthetically correct for this rose. So we'll go ahead and use the braided filler rod and make that work. So we'll just shorten the stem up so that way it doesn't have quite as much leverage with the heavier rose body, all things considered, compared to the structural integrity of this stem. So we'll make a shorter stem and weld it to the bottom of our rose. And then the only thing left to do is to put a couple of accent leaves on it, just to make it look that much more realistic. And then it's done aside from a base. So let's go ahead, knock the stem out, get those leaves put on, and then figure out what we're going to do for a base to wrap this thing up, to bring it all together. And then the most important thing is last, and that is putting some color to it. There we have our rose fully constructed, all of the petals, all of the leaves, everything else. The plume of it looks pretty good. I'm pretty satisfied with this. So the next thing to do is to figure out some sort of a base for it, as you can't just let it sit like that. It'll obviously topple over, and having it just laying down doesn't really do it for me. So I've done metal bases in the past, but today I think we're going to try to work with a little bit of wood. And this is a piece of rough cut lumber, just a rough cut board from the woods around the shop. As I'm sure you guys have seen when I have the doors open here, the shop is in the middle of 24 acres of woods. So this is actually a piece of wood that came from a tree that was up here on the property. And today we're going to take a little piece of it and give it life as a base for this rose. So I'm going to do just a simple square base, and it shouldn't take a whole lot to keep this thing vertical, maybe a 3x3 or something along those lines. So let me go ahead and get the piece of wood marked out how it needs to be cut. I'm not sure exactly what tool I'm going to use to cut it just yet, but I'll figure that out in a few minutes. I'm definitely not a woodworker, and I don't know what type of wood this is. One of you guys may be able to tell me, but that isn't going to stop me from making something out of wood, as yeah, I'm sure I can figure it out as we go through. So let's go ahead and get to working with this piece of wood, get our base made, and before too long this will be wrapped up, and we'll be able to see the finished product. Our base is now finished, and I should have used a router to put the chamfers on it, but I didn't feel like cleaning up the mess, so I just used the belt sander, and this is what we ended up with. So again, I'm not exactly sure what type of wood it is, but I did all of my shaping, all of my forming, and then swiped it with some mineral spirits that really brought the grain of the wood out. It's a pretty beautiful little piece of wood. And the center hole is drilled such that it accepts our rose very nicely. So the only thing left to do at this point is to color the rose, as I'm going to take advantage of titanium's beautiful thermal anodization, or the ability to be thermally anodized, and put a really nice color gradient on this. Now, I'm not sure exactly what colors I'm going to go with, but I'm going to chuck it in the vise and go at it with the torch and see what I can come up with. So before I do that, I'll go ahead and swipe it with some acetone just to make sure that I get any fingerprints or anything like that off of it that could make themselves apparent during the anodizing process. And once that's done, we'll hit it with some flame, turn it colors, and we'll have a beautiful finished rose here momentarily. There is our finished product. So did a nice light blue to purple fade on the rose petals themselves. The leaves are a nice blue to gold. And then obviously our piece of wood, whatever type of wood it is, with the mineral spirits to really make the grain pop out. I'm really happy with the way that this came out. And it's clean, it's simple, and most importantly, this is something that anybody with basic fabrication tools can do. Now, obviously, I made this out of titanium. It's a little bit fancier of an alloy, but you could do the same thing with just sheet steel from Home Depot, Lowe's, or whatever your local hardware or metal supplier is. And to be frank, the first couple of roses that I built were just that. But the more that I've built these, the more that I've kind of refined the process, and in terms of the petals, less is more. And you can really make something quite nice and quite cool and obviously quite heartfelt for not a whole lot of money. And the nice thing with this is a normal rose or a normal flower, they die over time. Whereas one of these metal roses, they are forever. So with all of that being said, and another episode in the books, let's go ahead and wrap this one up. So thank you guys, as always, for tuning in, for watching all the car stuff, watching, I guess now, how to make a flower out of sheet metal and filler rod, and everything that we do on this channel. It really warms my heart, and it makes me very happy that you guys choose to come along and come on this journey with me, and hope that it's entertaining for you, hope that you guys learn something, and hope that I can continue to do this for a long time. So with all that being said, and a massive heartfelt thank you to you guys as always, that'll be the end of this one. So until next time, be sure to subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.